What if the very thing that made you rich was the thing that killed you? What if the road that carried silk, spices, and unimaginable fortune into your warehouse was, this entire time, carrying something else alongside it? And what if by the time you understood that, it was already far too late to matter? You are a merchant working the Genoese trading post of Kaffa, on the coast of the Crimean Peninsula, and the year is 1343. To understand what's about to happen to you, we have to count backward first, then forward, because the story only makes sense as a countdown. 16 years before this moment, in 1331, in a garrison town in what is now northeastern China, a disease breaks out among Mongol soldiers stationed along a trade corridor connecting Chinese silk producers to Central Asian markets. Nobody in that garrison town has any reason to think this matters to you in Kaffa, 3,500 miles away. Why would they? You've never even heard of the place. If a countdown toward a disaster nobody saw coming, precisely because the pieces were scattered across 3 continents, is the kind of structure that keeps you hooked, this is a good place to hit subscribe, because tracing exactly how far apart the dots were before someone finally connected them is what this channel does best. 12 years before your moment in Kaffa, 1335. The medical historian Monica Green has spent years tracing the genetic lineage of the plague bacterium, Yersinia pestis, back through ancient DNA recovered from burial sites, and her research points to something the traditional story of the Black Death always leaves out. This wasn't a disease that suddenly appeared in Europe out of nowhere in 1347. It had been circulating, evolving, and spreading slowly along Central Asian trade networks for years beforehand, likely originating in wild rodent populations somewhere near the Tian Shan Mountains, moving outward exactly along the same roads that moved silk, silver, and grain. Here's the term worth decoding right now because you'll need it for the rest of this countdown. A trade network like this one, connecting China to Persia to the Black Sea to Europe under the relative safety of Mongol-controlled territory, is often called the Pax Mongolica, the Mongol Peace. For nearly a century, the Mongol Empire's control over this vast stretch of Asia had done something no one had managed before. It made long-distance trade dramatically safer and faster, merchants like you moving goods across thousands of miles of what used to be dangerous, fragmented territory now controlled by a single political and military network. That safety is exactly what should worry you, standing in Kaffa in 1343, though you don't know it yet. 8 years before your moment, 1339. Historical records from Central Asian Christian communities, gravestones near Lake Issyk-Kul in what is now Kyrgyzstan, show a sudden spike in deaths, marked plainly with the word for plague. The climate historian Bruce Campbell has connected outbreaks like this one to a broader pattern he traces across the 14th century, a period of unusual climate volatility, cooling temperatures, and disrupted rainfall across Eurasia that pushed rodent populations carrying the plague bacterium out of their usual, more isolated habitats and into closer contact with the trade routes and the humans traveling them. Do you see the shape of this yet? A climate shift nobody in Kaffa could feel. A rodent population shift nobody in Kaffa could see. A trade network built for speed and safety, doing exactly what it was designed to do. Every piece of this, individually, looks completely unrelated to a Genoese merchant counting his silk bales on the Black Sea coast. 3 years before your moment, 1340, trade caravans moving west along the southern branch of the Silk Road begin reporting unusually high mortality in towns along the route through Central Asia. You would have heard rumors of this, the way merchants always hear rumors. Sickness somewhere far to the east, the kind of story that gets exaggerated in the retelling and dismissed by the time it reaches a port as busy and confident as Kaffa. Now, 1343, you are standing in Kaffa, and the city is under siege. A Mongol army led by Yani Beg has surrounded the trading post, furious at Genoese merchants for reasons that have nothing to do with disease, purely political and commercial tension boiling over into open conflict. You watch the siege from inside the walls, confident that Kaffa's fortifications, some of the strongest on the Black Sea, will hold. You have no idea that the besieging army outside your walls is dying of something else entirely. By 1346, the historian Ole Benedictow's research into plague mortality across medieval Europe suggests the disease had already spread through the besieging Mongol forces so severely that, according to a contemporary account written by the notary Gabriel de Mussy, the attackers began catapulting the bodies of plague victims over Kaffa's walls, whether as a deliberate act of biological warfare or simply a desperate attempt to dispose of the dead. Historians still debate how much that specific incident mattered compared to rats and fleas already moving freely between the besiegers and the besieged. Either way, the outcome for you inside those walls is the same. Picture what those final weeks inside Kaffa actually felt like. You'd spent the siege confident in stone walls thick enough to stop any army. Nobody built those walls to stop a flea riding on the back of a black rat scurrying along a grain sack. Your warehouse, stacked with the same silk and spices that made this posting worth the risk, sits a short walk from the granaries where rodent populations move freely between stored grain and the crowded merchant housing nearby. The density that made Kaffa an efficient, profitable trading post, everyone and everything packed close together for speed and convenience, is precisely the density that turns a disease outbreak into an uncontainable one. You watch neighbors fall sick within days of each other, and for the first time since the siege began, the besieging army outside your walls stops being the thing you're most afraid of. 1347. You board a ship leaving Kaffa, along with other merchants and sailors fleeing the siege, carrying your goods, your fortune, and, unknown to any of you, the disease itself. Your ship sails for Constantinople. Other ships from the same Black Sea trade network sail for Genoa, for Venice, for Marseille, following exactly the routes that decades of Pax Mongolica prosperity had made fast, reliable, and safe. You've seen this before. You just haven't seen it move this fast. By the end of 1348, the plague has reached England. By 1351, conservative estimates from Benedictow's research put European mortality between 30 and 60%, tens of millions of deaths across a continent whose entire economic and social structure had been built on a level of population density and labor availability that simply no longer existed. Whole villages disappear from tax records. Skilled trades lose the master craftsmen needed to train the next generation. Landowners suddenly desperate for labor find themselves negotiating with surviving peasants for the first time in generations, a shift some historians credit with helping unravel the entire feudal labor system across Western Europe in the decades that followed. Zoom back out to the trade network itself, because the damage didn't stop at Europe's edge. The same interconnected routes that carried the plague westward to you also carried it back along every other branch of the network. Cities across the Middle East, from Damascus to Cairo, suffered mortality rates historians estimate were comparable to Europe's, and trade volume along the overland Silk Road itself never fully recovered to its Pax Mongolica peak. The very connectivity that had built fortunes like yours ended up shrinking the network that created it, merchants growing warier of overland routes, political fragmentation following the Mongol Empire's own decline, and a gradual pivot toward the maritime trade routes that would come to define the centuries after you. The very network that made Kaffa rich, that made Genoa rich, that connected silk from China to silver in Venice faster and more reliably than any trade system before it, was the exact mechanism that let a disease travel from a Mongol garrison town to the heart of Europe in under 2 decades. Every strength of the Pax Mongolica, its speed, its safety, its unprecedented connectivity, was also unavoidably a strength for whatever traveled alongside the silk. Here is the part this video wants to leave sitting with you uncomfortably, and it isn't a lesson about medieval trade routes. It's about the shape of the risk itself. The thing that made your fortune and the thing that ended millions of lives were never two separate things. They were the same infrastructure, viewed from 2 different angles, and nobody standing inside that infrastructure while it was working could have told you which angle they were looking at, right up until the bodies started coming over the wall.